Curb Singers, the night they drove Old Dixie down. Before that, a new tune from Herb Alpert, new album, Coco Loco. It brings us to 18 minutes after 7 o'clock here in Edmonton City. It was about 5 years ago that Frank Roberts assumed the chairmanship of VIA Rail, a federal agency set up to organize and hopefully to improve passenger rail services in this country. A few days ago, he announced that he's hanging up his hat at the end of October, retiring from the service. He's on the line with me now from Montreal. Good morning, Mr. Roberts.
Good morning.
Are you frustrated?
No, not at all. I've never been so happy in all my life.
You mean you're relieved?
Well, no, I've been 43 years at it. I started to work 3 days after I was 17. And I've been going ever since, and I thought it was just about time that I gave someone else a chance.
Well, you've had your ups and downs in the 5 years, or VIA Rail has had its ups and downs. I don't know that you have. You seem to be a fairly even-tempered fellow. What do you think that you've accomplished in that 5 years? Is it better now than it was 5 years ago?
Oh, very much so. I think we've proven that there's a future for rail passenger services in Canada. We're now handling 48% more people than CN and CP did in 1976. And when you consider that it had been a continuous decline in the number of passengers handled in rail passenger services in Canada, I think that's quite an accomplishment.
That doesn't seem to ring very true from this end of the country. It seems to me that most of those people must be in that Windsor to Montreal corridor.
No, Phil, it's generally across the country. It's generally across the country. It's amazing. Granted, we had a low point on November the 15th last year, when all the changes were made, when we lost 20% of our train miles.
Well, they cut your budget to shreds.
Yeah, well, they did. There's no goddamn doubt about that.
There's a mandatory...
But, it was do that or die. That's really what it amounts to, because we need the capital investments, the capital monies in order to invest in the system. You know, the system has been capital starved for 30 years, you know.
Well, there's a question I have to ask you about that. I recall meeting you on Front Page Challenge on this subject, and recalling your statement made about that time that if they cut your budget any further, you'd quit.
Very much so.
Is there any connection between that system and what you're doing now?
No, none whatsoever. What happens, Phil, is that we've been working for 5 years to really set a direction for rail passenger services in Canada. And we've now developed a comprehensive business plan that we're going to be presenting to the government on July the 1st. And I talked it over with my wife, and I decided that I was going to be 60 on October the 20th. So I said, well, what we should be doing is announcing that we're going to be retiring on October 31st. Then the government will have an opportunity to appoint someone to appoint my successor. And I'll be able to work with my successor in selling this business plan.
Without telling tales out of school, what are some of the broad lines of the plan?
Oh, I think that, it means capital investments in the system and a general upgrading of rail passenger services across the country.
It's interesting that the national dream is being rebroadcast on television these days. And it was that railway system that brought the country together, and some of us still think that there's great potential for railways in this country and most other countries of the world, particularly in Europe and in places like Japan. Rail services are the choice means of transportation. They move more people than anything else, and there are places in this country where an efficient rail service, I can suggest the Edmonton Calgary Corridor, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which if we had an efficient, fast train going from downtown Edmonton to downtown Calgary, you couldn't keep people off of the thing, and yet we haven't done that.
I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more, Phil. And we're working very closely now with the Economic Development Ministry in Edmonton, and we've appointed a project manager for the Calgary-Edmonton corridor, and we need a new station in Edmonton, we need a new station in Calgary, and we need an upgraded system between Calgary and Edmonton. There's a fantastic future for that corridor.
That's right.
And, we'll have LRCs out there as soon as the second order that is now in for LRCs is delivered.
That's no news, but is there a timetable?
Yeah. Well, what happens is that the LRCs will be delivered during where there could be some slippage by the manufacturer, and there usually is on large orders like that.
We're talking of LRCs for an Edmonton Calgary run?
Exactly, exactly. So what we'll be doing is we'll be building a maintenance facilities for LRCs in Edmonton, and those trains would be out there towards the end of 1984, beginning of 1985, depending on the construction schedule and just how the shakedown period goes for those new trains. We have some problems, of course, in that we now operate to Edmonton South only.
That's right.
South Edmonton, and that really doesn't make sense.
Not a big problem if you can get together with the CPR, who own an excellent bridge that gets you across the river right into downtown Edmonton.
Exactly, and a coordination with the LRT would be just what the doctor ordered.
What would you see as a realistic date that such a service might be in operation?
Well, it'll all depend on just how fast our discussions go with the government of Alberta, with the city of Edmonton, and Canadian Pacific, of course. There's a lot of CP facilities to be moved and that type of thing, and that's proving to be quite a barrier.
Well, clearly the problem that you've had has been a problem of money. You've never had enough to do what you wanted to do, and in fact you had large part of what you had to start with taken away. Do you see any possibility of getting more budget from the federal government in the years ahead?
I think it is. One of our basic problems, Phil, is that you talked about Japan, and you can talk about France and all the countries in Europe, really. And what's happened over there is that the one government has been responsible for air, roads, and rail. And one of our problems right now is that the federal government is responsible for rail and air, and the 10 provinces are responsible for roads. And really, the real trade-offs are between the road and the rail. And therefore, if you shouldn't spend money on roads and rail and air at the same time. You should decide what the dominant mode should be in a corridor like Calgary and Edmonton, and obviously rail is a great contender in that particular area.
Particularly in these days of high energy costs, it's a very efficient way of moving people.
Yeah. And what's happened is that really the federal government and the provincial government are going to have to get together.